My goodness, does God have work for us to do? And we're doing it, right? I mean, since the beginning of the year, Arapahoe has been present in the community, in lots of communities, praying and feeding immigrant families at the ice field office, helping families grocery shop at Hamilton Park's Path to Nourishment, helping Carolyn Boucare families obtain food for the week from Network of Community Ministries Mobile Food Market, and pivoting or adjusting when the mobile food market truck is broken. We provided food for Austin Street Center neighbors on an icy weekend, finding ways to keep our commitment even when the ice storms hit Dallas. We've worked toward the art of democracy with Dallas Area Interfaith, advocating for more funding for children's education, and engaged in that democracy by encouraging each other to vote and voting ourselves. We've had vital conversations about immigration to stand firmly in biblical principles and learn more about the plight of the immigrant. We've been re-engaging with the refugee community by distributing from our furniture and household storage shed in the parking lot, and engaged in our monthly Richardson Interfaith Alliance lunch. We've hosted legal services sessions for immigrants for justice for our neighbors. And we've hosted dinner this weekend with our friends at the Dallas Dialogue Institute of Dallas as they celebrated their iftar dinner during the season of Ramadan. We fed senior citizens at Network of Communities. We fed families at the La Mirada apartment community on their monthly community night. We participated on several frigid winter nights as we helped care for the unhoused through the Plano overnight warming station. Arapahoe facilitators piloted a new racial justice program from our partners, Let's Talk Race, titled Let's Talk Race, the Latin American Experience. We've continued weekly meetings with Texas Impact to organize our congregation around the issues of public education and immigration and maternal health and more. And we've sent representatives, Pastor Jenny and me, along with many letters from you and others from the Horizon Texas Conference, to Congress, to Washington, D.C., where we worshiped and marched to the Capitol and met with representatives to address the inhumane conditions under which immigrants are being treated, their arrests, their detention, the sheer dehumanization and fear that they're subjected to every day. All this before we even talk about keeping up with the news. God has work for us to do, and we're doing it. But dang it, we're exhausted. Am I right? Exhausted. I have a cough drop in my mouth because I spent the last week recovering from illness. Exhausted. Today we continue our worship series, Finding Our Way in the Dark, by acknowledging that exhaustion is its own kind of darkness. And for a congregation that is so active in justice, advocacy, and missional outreach, it's far too easy to wear ourselves out, to the point that we might wonder, why are we even trying? Nothing ever changes. To the point where we might lose vision of the hope we're so boldly called to proclaim. Today, I'd like to remind us that exhaustion and weariness are normal, and that it's important to each of us to rest, renew, and restore ourselves to continue that work God has for us faithfully. Verse 4 of Psalm 23 shares, even though I walk through the darkest valley. Now, wait a minute. Is the psalmist talking about us here? I mean, surely those darkest valleys are meant for much, darker things, right? I mean, my exhaustion can't compare to the valleys of those in the middle of a war or those fearing for their lives, hiding from ice. Those are the people the shepherd is here for, right? Well, there's my first problem, a comparison problem and challenge. Sometimes this tendency to compare our work to others' work just adds on to that exhaustion. It's not that bad. I can keep going. I don't need to rest. I'm going to keep my head down and push through. It's not that dark, we kid ourselves. Someone else needs God more. That is exhaustion talking, people. and it's messing with your mind. We all need God, and God is available for all of us. So we need a spiritual practice to remind us when we're exhausted that God is with us, even us. Interesting that if we back up a few passages to verses 1 and 2, we read this: "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in still waters. He restores my soul." There's a connection here to a spiritual practice that helps me, and I'd like to share it. It's one that a spiritual director recommended to me, and I find myself coming back to it over and over again, especially when the darkness of exhaustion and overwhelmingness hits me. He told me to physically lie on the ground, let the earth support and nourish me. Have you ever gone outside? Do you remember times when you were a child that you'd just lay in the grass and feel refreshed? At the Faithful Resistance Gathering in D.C. last week, Bishop Latrell Easterling shared a powerful sermon based on Psalm 24, and it started with this: "The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it." She pointed us into a similar direction, that recognizing the earth and all that's in it, the dirt, the trees, the grass, the weeds, the flowers, the people, all of it are the Lord's. And by connecting to the land with our marching feet, in this case the DC trip, we are honoring the Lord. I reached out to that spiritual director recently to thank him for recommending that practice, that one of lying on the ground, that I return to over and over, and I realize more and more the connection of my relationship with God and creation. He makes me lie down in still waters. He restores my soul. When I think about it, I hear it as connect with the ground, with the creation, to remind yourself why God is calling you to this work. It's not to exhaust yourself. It's not to do it better than anyone else. It's all right here in the ground of creation. Bishop Easterling shared that when we forget that creation is God's, we turn away from the image of God and into a world of power structures that deny individuals their humanity, including ourselves. Lying on the ground, that rug at home or in a private office, that gives you the reminder that you are God's and it's all connected. The stillness of that practice helps us to breathe and to know we don't need to go this alone. We can rest. I've been thinking of my father-in-law a lot this week. Some of you know that he passed away while I was in D.C., and I cut my trip a little short to return to Dallas. And I've been thinking about how he loved Iowa. He grew up in a small town, about the size of my palm there, in northeast Iowa, Lansing. Steve said, "It's the one place he knows that I can de-stress the fastest." We would visit his grandparents, who lived in a small 4-bedroom house on the banks of the Mississippi River, right underneath the Black Hawk Bridge that connects Iowa to Wisconsin. I hadn't really focused on why this place was calming to me, but it is. Maybe it was the bridge itself, because we could hear vehicles crossing into the midnight hours, and we'd fall asleep to the flashing light, warning travelers that their options on the Iowa side of the bridge were to either turn left or turn right at the T-stop. Maybe it was hiking to the top of Mount Hosmer and looking down, finding the bridge as a landmark in a way that told us, whatever you need, here I am. You're grounded. Maybe it was sitting in the screened-in back porch at the Sweeney house, watching the barges and the boats, seeing life happening on the river as it had for centuries. In the years I have been able to visit, admittedly not near the number of times that Steve and Catherine have, and others in the Sweeney family, but in the years I visited, there was comfort and foundation and grounding for me. It was restful, slower pace than I was used to. But life throws us curves, and a few weeks ago, this happened.
Fire in the hole.
That was the Black Hawk Bridge. It imploded intentionally. It wasn't a surprise. We knew that the bridge was coming down. Gene had sold the house his parents lived in, and he was raised in with his sister to make room for an expanded road, and the need to move the bridge was apparent for safety reasons. And watching that, and then with Gene dying, it feels a bit like we've lost a chunk of grounding and foundation in our lives, which returns me to that spiritual practice of grounding, physically lying on the ground wherever I am, well, within reason. I can remember. It connects us to all that God has created, and it leads to a renewal that brings hope by connecting us to God and to each other. What do you think I mean by renewal? Rest is a word that I think all of us can relate to, but renewal? Let me propose that renewal is the process occurring when we find that time to rest. Accepting renewal as a spiritual practice allows God to revive our hearts and our minds for that work ahead. Allowing for renewal, inviting renewal. It's not easy, primarily because it asks us to do the one thing that not many of us are good at or enjoy. Renewal compels us to wait. As the prophet Isaiah speaks to the Israelites in the Babylon exile, even the youth will faint and be weary, and the young will fall exhausted. But those who wait for the Lord will renew their strength. Come on, Isaiah. I did my rest, the grounding thing. I reconnected. And now you want me to wait? People need me. I've got to get back into work. You told me, God, that you have work for me to do. Well, yes, that work is waiting. And here's why. Because God is still working in our stillness. Those who wait for the Lord will renew their strength. The promise is that we will be renewed to continue God's work. The call is to wait. And that is so hard when we know that people are enduring injustices around us. So hard. But it's been done before. Pastor Jonathan wrote this in a summary. Rosa Parks didn't just decide to sit down one day. She was trained, prepared, supported for the long haul. And he reminds us that justice is a marathon, not a sprint. The practice of renewal is waiting for the Lord. It's one of quiet resistance. And I'm not speaking of the resistance you'll hear at protests or writings or in crowds. I'm speaking of quiet resistance that acknowledges that God is at work, creating something new in us. Resistance to the expectation that our response is urgent and has to be paid attention to now, and knowing that responding too quickly could even misinterpret God. In addition to that DC trip, I went to Austin in February to join my colleagues from FaithWorks and Let's Talk Race. Those who sponsored the El Paso trip that I went to in October that I talked about, you remember that? FaithWorks was hosting their annual Compassion and Justice Conference at this beautiful church called Riverbend Church in West Austin. Absolutely stunning limestone fountains and peaceful surroundings. They were just life-giving for me And yes, I even laid down in front of the fountain. Stephen Reeves is the executive director of FaithWorks and shared a message that is relevant for renewal. And we've talked some in our journey towards racial justice about Valerie Cower's work on revolutionary love. Stephen had just been with her the weekend before at a conference in D.C. Valerie Cower is an American activist born to an Indian American Sikh family in Clover, California. And she speaks to audiences with passion that enact a revolutionary love. That revolutionary love is to look upon the face of another and say, "You are a part of me that I don't know yet." She acknowledges that to do otherwise promotes a darkness within our communities. And she challenges us to view this darkness with one prompting question. What if this darkness is not a darkness of the tomb, but a darkness of the womb? Stephen took that image and expanded on it, that the womb is in fact similar to a cocoon where the DNA building blocks are forming something new, like a butterfly, which FaithWorks chose to be the symbol of their new organization's name. Both Stephen and Valerie point to what is happening in apparent darkness, whether in the womb or in the cocoon, and I say during our renewal, after our rest, that this is not an inactive darkness. This is a creative darkness where God is at work within us, where we are not idle, but where the work is reliant upon our interaction with God's work. We're hunkered down because maybe we just can't do anymore, but God can. And it's imperative that we slow down and don't miss this step, that we acknowledge the marathon and not the sprint, because to sprint might cause us to miss the message God has for us in our work. Waiting for the Lord is itself a spiritual practice. And in justice work, it's that long arc of the moral universe that bends towards justice. Our renewal could take a day or a week, a month, maybe longer. But when God tells us it's time, we emerge from that dark cocoon with restored energy for the work ahead. We're restored in our hearts and our minds to be in community with others who are active in the work of justice, with hearts that are passionate to bring love to the disenfranchised and the vulnerable, to speak out against hate and systems that carry forward injustices year after year. Historian and author Dr. Jamar Tisby writes this in his book, The Spirit of Justice. There is a relentless drive in human beings, both inward and transcendent, that demands dignity and propels our progress. It is a spirit of justice. It is the conviction to continue the struggle no matter the odds or the obstacles. It is the heartbeat of people who hunger and thirst for righteousness. It will not concede. It will not let the evil of racism and inhumanity prevail. It will not quit until justice rolls down like a river. This spirit of justice is in every one of us, and especially evident among this congregation. You, my friends, thirst for hunger and righteousness, and it is holy, godly work. But I want you to remember something, that resting is not a concession. It is reconnecting to creation. Remember that renewal is not inaction. It is creative. And that restoring ourselves to enact God's work, that is how we continue to seek justice for others in the long haul. So when exhaustion hits and you don't think you can do anymore, Maybe God isn't asking you to do anything. Maybe God is reminding you, even though you walk in the darkest valley, those who wait for the Lord will renew their strength. I ask you to ask yourself, what beautiful work does God have for you, crafted within the darkness of the cocoon? Maybe now is the time to ground ourselves for the work ahead. May it ever be so. Amen.